Hello everyone, greetings from the Servant of Nero, AJ here, and this marks the start of the Faction Overview series wherein I'll cover general motivations, military and civil organisation of the playable factions in War Machine and Hordes. There won't be much by way of deep lore or history per se, as that'll be for a later series which requires a hell of a lot more rereading and probably longer videos. So this series is as much for my benefit as newcomers to the game world, serving as a groundwork in both cases more than anything else. Anyway, these overviews will be done in pairs, with one of the main factions paired with either a sub-faction or a limited faction. I tried to give each pair a theme or reasonable connecting point, but in the end it was too difficult to do neatly across all the factions in the game, so it was picked at random. And the transition from major to minor in each video will probably come off as a bit weird. For this first overview, we have the men of the Northern Kingdom recently declared an empire, followed by those whose conversion into a proper military force this empire all but instigated. That's Khador and the Crucible Guard for the uninitiated, with a slightly easier transition, luckily. The Winter Kingdom can trace their history to long before the Orgoth invasion, to the Khadik Empire that ruled over much of the territory that is now Khador, as well as a few other parts of Western Imoran now subsumed by the other kingdoms. In recent generations, the Vanar dynasty had rebuilt the nation's glory, though Mikhail Vanar, the father of the dynasty, was a reluctant king, wishing only to supplant the universally reviled Ivan the Frenzied. But Mikhail's rule ushered in the first period of sustained stability after many years of strife and uncertainty for the kingdom. Continuing his legacy with a brief interregnum, the dynasty did much for Khador's development alongside the other kingdoms. Under the once queen, now empress, Ayn the 11th, they have gone forth to fulfill their destiny in restoring the old borders of the Khadik Empire, amongst other things. Naturally, this would come at the expense of others, and no one of political note in Khador was under any illusions that long-term peace with any of their southern neighbours was anything but a pleasant dream. Thus, with aggressive imperialist expansion serving as the means to the Khadoran throne's ends, the tool with which it accomplished this had to be a fitting one. Leading the Khadoran nation and its armies is the Empress herself, and while she does not busy herself with the minutiae of the various legions' undertakings, she is no figurehead leader who knows nothing of military ways. Instead, she is careful to know and appreciate the capabilities of her armed forces. Second only to the Empress is the Great Vizier, her closest counsellor and the first minister of the empire, Simoniev Blastavia, for whom both Ayn and the Khadoran people are grateful for his service to the kingdom and empire. With such responsibility to Empress and nation, the Vizier divulges oversight of his duties to the 8 offices of his ministry, the notable ones as far as the military is concerned being sections 3, 4, 6, and 8, which control, respectively, intelligence and covert operations, logistics, management of new imperial territories, and census and conscription information. As to the military itself, organisation of the Khadoran armed forces is centred on the High Command under its Premier, currently Mikhail Horstcha. Strategic command falls to the now 4 Supreme Commandants, one for each of Khador's 3 great armies, with special dispensation for the latest Supreme Commandant, Gorvald Irusk. But as a more administrative and grand strategic body, High Command contains a high proportion of retired senior officers who lend their voices to strategic planning, though they do not have any de facto authority. Nonetheless, the plans as assembled by High Command are filtered down through to the great armies, and perhaps the Khadoran fleet, should that be pertinent. The great armies dispose of a total of 6 divisions of variable strength, each led by a commandant. Every division is comprised of 3 commands, led somewhat predictably by officers of rank commander. The commands were once the historic armies of the great princes of Khador, but with the increased centralization of the armed forces, the commands came to be the highest level of administrative command at the tactical level, with the composition and manpower far removed from their roots of locally raised forces, a consequence of which is that many great princes and their senior-most vassals serve as commanders or commandants. In effect, though, such positions are honorary at best for many of them, who only hold rank by virtue of their nobility and are, unsurprisingly, wholly unsuited to the life on campaign. High Command is wise enough to ensure that more suitable men do the actual commanding in war. Within each command are 3 legions, headed by lieutenant commanders or, in some instances, senior or veteran Kovniks. Kovniks, more conventionally, lead the subordinate unit of battalion, of which each legion deploys 5 or 6, depending on the total legion assets available. And rounding out the Khadoran military hierarchy are the companies and forces, commanded by captains and lieutenants, respectively. Like their Signoran enemies, or tentative allies depending on the geopolitical situation, Khador can and does boast many powerful warcasters who lead the Empire's forces in various capacities. The two great nations share few things in common, but most revolve around making the best of this valuable asset. Consequently, Khadoran warcasters, while bearing military rank, for practical purposes operate outside of the general chain of command, though they are answerable to Irisk and High Command, and can therefore assume leadership of various military resources wherever they find themselves posted. More than anyone else, the warcasters can be transferred quite fluidly from command to command, or legion to legion, depending on their circumstances. However, many have settled into particular positions or offices thanks to the reputation they hold within the army and their own preferred specialties, as well as Irisk's awareness of what they're best at doing. Ayn herself also has a certain savvy in knowing which warcasters are good at doing what. Here, though, the similarities with Signar end as the men and machines that Khadorans put into the field of battle are decidedly different. All three great armies are formed around a backbone of Winter Guard, with most serving in basic infantry companies armed with axe and blunderbuss. But those lucky enough are issued with newer weaponry of the Rifle Corps. These conscripts are supplemented in battle by the professional corps of Iron Fangs, whether pikemen or Uhlans, assault commandos, widowmakers, and man-of-war armored troopers. This last is a feature almost unique to Khador's military and completely unique to their history. In the men of war, they have heavily armored soldiers whose durability and implacability strives to match light warjacks from other realms. Khador is no stranger to Cortex technology, but the Empire finds itself perennially short of the high quality and refined materials required to make a long-lasting and stable Cortex. The result is a warjack design philosophy that emphasizes building a war machine capable of protecting the Cortex from the most withering of enemy fire and the most determined of assaults. Khadoran forces can dispose of as many heavy warjacks as their counterparts, if not more, but this comes with the cost of having no tradition of light warjack doctrines, whether construction or military. Instead, coal-fired steam-powered technology was applied to man-portable suits of armor that became the men of war, replacing the Cortex with the human, with all the accompanying implications of such a substitution. Of the others, assault commandos and widowmakers are more recent additions to the armies, finding functions that evolved from strategic needs and typical Khadoran pragmatism. On the other hand, the Iron Fangs are an artifact of Khador's storied history, an evolution of spear-armed militias that became the Great Prince's preferred infantry liegemen, and now the armored anvil of many a Khadoran legion. Alongside them, and sharing their history, ride the Iron Fang Uhlans, the pikemen's traditional hammer counterpart. These various bodies of patriotic and loyal soldiers are aided by irregular huntsmen steeped in traditional Khadoran mountain or forest ways of life, as well as the Khayazi gangs of the extensive Khadoran underworld. On a more sinister note is the shadowy Grey Lord Covenant and their more questionable resources, as though the Khayazis weren't shadowy enough. From the Grey Lords and their occult research comes a certain ruthless favour to how Khador makes war, as they do all they can to uncover the secrets of Imori's history, no matter who else has claim on them, or where they may be. With such as these at their disposal, the Empress and her ministers made themselves well equipped to attain their long-held aspirations. In the face of Khador's aggressive expansion so close to his borders, King Baird of Ord took the unprecedented step of as much as browbeating the armed wing of the displaced Order of the Golden Crucible into being a mercenary force under his, albeit far from complete, command, as a supplement to his own standing forces. While he would never be able to say with any real honesty that he held control of the Crucible Guard, he did have no small influence over its deployments and operations, though. And being the ever-wily diplomat, he would ensure that his involvement would never be foolish. The Crucible Guard only very recently became a formal military force, where before the loss of the Order's central headquarters at Thunderhead in Leren, they served merely as escorts, bodyguards, and patrols with little inclination or capacity for battlefield combat. However, the Khadoran invasion changed everything, and needs must the Crucible Guard adapt to match the circumstances the Order now found itself in. Some surrendered to the invaders, some resisted, while others retreated to friendlier territory or other cities where the Order had active branches. But with the agreement made with Ord, the Guard reformed, actively hiring mercenaries to swell their ranks, with cooperation between the Order's arcanists, alchemists, and mechanics with the Guard's commanders to equip the Guard with the most ingenious and technically advanced arms and armor that they could craft. Prototypes were rigorously tested, and new tactics and doctrines were developed to take maximum advantage in as little time as possible, to ultimately exploit the brilliant minds of the Order's best. Thus did Baird have a deterrent to Khador, and even Signar if the situation called for it, while the Order had their means to enact vengeance against the invaders and take back their historic home. The Order is led by the Aurum Magnus, Helt Langworth, who made the agreements concerning the Crucible Guard with the King. As leader, he has broad oversight for the Guard's strategic deployment and long-term goals, even though Baird's involvement makes this a little more complicated than preferable. Thanks to this special relationship between the Order and the Kingdom of Ord, Langworth appointed Aurum Lucanum Krina Torkale as an effective ambassador between them. General governing of the Order's activities falls to the Assembly of Masters composed of Aurum Lucanum rank members, while most of the research work and application of the Order's new technologies to the Guard's armory falls to the Aurum Omni, the lowest rank of full Order members. They, in turn, are assisted by apprentices who must master their craft before acceptance into the Order's official ranks. As to the Guard itself, it is composed along the lines of multiple mercenary companies that are brigaded together in various combinations, depending on operational goals. Overall command, administratively and at the top of the Guard's hierarchy, is Commander of the Guard, who also coordinates efforts with Ord's official military. Strategic and operational command in the field falls to the Marshal General, who, as of 611 AR, when the Crucible Guard was ready to be fully deployed in earnest, was Baldwin Gearhart, a former mercenary warcaster. The ad hoc brigades are led by theatre commanders, though this is merely a designation rather than a formal rank. These theatre commanders are predominantly the Order's warcasters, who are often active as members of both the Order and the Guard. Companies and their constituent platoons are led by captains and lieutenants, much like other mercenary companies or equivalents in the militaries throughout the Iron Kingdoms. However, particular to the Crucible Guard companies are their specializations, where some will be entirely composed of regular infantry, albeit equipped with the Order's issued weaponry, while select others will dispose nothing but the Order's prized railless battle engines. Naturally, there are other conventional companies that find broad analogues in other militaries, such as heavy infantry companies and assault companies, though this latter type is manned by the elite rocket infantry unique to the Crucible Guard. The companies are deployed in a flexible fashion so that they can be brigaded together with ease and their captains can adjust their tactics in accordance with the circumstances of their engagements without compromising strategic goals in any way. The variety of assets the Crucible Guard can call upon is as large as any nation's armed forces, impressively for an organization of its size. They are, as one would expect, based around the mechanical developments and alchemical elixirs and concoctions that the Order's Aurum-ranked members develop. The extent of their technology, however, means that nothing the Guard fields is archaic or obsolete, but being a part of the Iron Kingdoms and having evolved alongside those kingdoms means that the Warcaster gift and the Cortex technology-driven Warjacks and Colossals remain central to their military strength, strategy, and tactics. As a result, their available Warjacks serve as the source of familiarity in their enemies' eyes, as it is at least one technology that can be easily recognized by others. Even the more questionable elixirs, like those that give rise to the erratic trances, alchemically enhanced soldiers granted psychokinetic abilities, have uses if their effectiveness can be proven. What should be of most concern to those that wish for the fall of the Order of the Golden Crucible, though, is Aurum Legate Lucas Timore. In him, the most powerful of the Order's technologies is manifested, for the Legate is just an ordinary, if talented and brilliant, human. He and his wife developed a formula that could, by alchemical means, grant the Warcaster gift to those without it. If one among the Order can be so transformed, what is to say the remainder cannot?